First Person Advisors is now a subsidiary of NFP, the fifth largest insurance broker in the world, combining local expertise with access to global capabilities and solutions. Learn more at firstpersonadvisors.com.
My favorite book of all time is Jim Collins' Good to Great, and that was really our guide along the ExactTarget journey. And one of the elements that Collins speaks about is level 5 leadership, which is a mix of humility, but also determination. And we tried to infuse that into our culture, that we were humble, kind, hardworking people, but we still wanted to be best in the world. We still wanted to compete and win. And we wanted to be the largest marketing technology company in the world, but do it in the right way, do it with integrity and character.
Doing it the right way is the only way Hoosier entrepreneur Scott Dorsey knows how to build and develop a business. When Scott and his partners founded ExactTarget in Indianapolis more than 20 years ago, little did they know their company would go on to become one of the global leaders in marketing technology, a pioneer, trailblazer, visionary, a major force who has helped lay the groundwork for Indiana's burgeoning tech scene, and a man who believes the key to success starts with investing at home. Scott Dorsey is my guest this week on the Business and Beyond podcast. Hello and welcome to the Business and Beyond podcast, presented by PNC. I'm Gary Dick. When Scott Dorsey decided to move his family from Chicago to his wife's hometown of Indianapolis in the late 90s, technology was really just beginning to take a giant leap forward. But Dorsey was a tech novice, had no software experience. Still, Dorsey, his brother-in-law, and another partner saw an opportunity to get in on the front end of the coming marketing technology wave. So they launched ExactTarget in 2000, grew it into a global powerhouse before eventually selling to Salesforce in 2013 for $2.5 billion, a record for an Indiana tech company. Importantly, Scott still has his hands and heart in the tech world, serving as co-founder and managing partner of Indianapolis-based venture studio High Alpha, and helping to shape that next wave of innovators and startups right here in Indiana. And I'm pleased to be joined by Scott Dorsey on this week's episode of the Business and Beyond podcast. Scott, welcome. Great to be with you.
Thanks, Gary. Likewise. Thanks for having me on the program.
Yeah, as I read that, I was thinking to myself, it is hard to believe it's been more than 20 years since you and your partners launched ExactTarget. In some ways, to me, it seems like yesterday. How does it feel for you?
It is hard to believe, Gary. I was 33 when we started ExactTarget, 33. I'm 53 today. And, throughout my childhood and even kind of early professional life, I moved state to state, with a lot of frequency. And to be here in Indianapolis for 20 years and look back on raising my family and, all that's happened with ExactTarget and Salesforce, it's pretty incredible and very, very rewarding and gratifying. And, I'm just honored to be a part of this community.
Yeah, you really have put down roots here. So take us back and give us kind of a thumbnail how you, your brother-in-law, Chris Baggett, and Peter McCormick in 2000 launched ExactTarget. As I said, you didn't have really any tech experience. You're a marketing guy, right? How did it come together?
Yeah, really all three of us, Gary, we were non-technical founders, jumping into the world of software for the first time. For me, I had just finished my MBA at Kellogg. I was fortunate enough to go to Northwestern from 96 to 99, really just as the internet was coming of age. And Kellogg did a remarkable job quickly building curriculum around e-commerce, internet business, entrepreneurial finance. And I just jumped in with both feet. I loved it. Gary. We had so many panel discussions with Chicago tech entrepreneurs, and I wanted to be them. Our capstone course was actually to head out to Silicon Valley and study the tech ecosystem and literally bring recommendations back to Mayor Daley in the city of Chicago on how they could drive more tech innovation in the heartland. So that was very much my mindset from 96 to 99, with good fortune, very good fortune. I married into this extraordinary family from Greenfield and inherited two pretty incredible brothers-in-law, Dr. Rick Sasso and then Chris Baggett. And Chris, really is just an extraordinary entrepreneur. You know Chris so well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll tell you, Gary, unlike any founder or entrepreneur I've worked with, Chris just like he can see around corners. His ability to read, talk to people, think uniquely, and stitch different trends together is really unique. Chris kind of grew up in database marketing, working for R. Donnelley. He saw the internet was going to change everything, in the world of marketing, started to experiment with email marketing within his own small business. And then he really had the idea and the vision for ExactTarget. I was just kind of a freshly, minted MBA, excited to go build a business. And thankfully, Chris talked me into moving to Indianapolis and giving it a go with him. And, thank goodness he did.
Yeah. Well, and growing a tech company back then in Indiana, it was a different kind of deal. The tech ecosystem, clearly not what it is today. And I know you were very much involved over the years in trying to solve some of those challenges. But think for Indiana, think back to that, Scott. Connectivity was an issue, a few nonstop flights, daylight saving time was a big issue. So there were a lot of hurdles to starting a tech company back then.
Yeah, it's so true, Gary. The odds were stacked against us, no question. First, from a timing perspective, we were starting ExactTarget right after, the internet bubble had burst in late 2000, early 2001. There was no funding, available for new internet and software companies, in particular with the founding team as inexperienced as the three of us. And then you're absolutely right. The ecosystem in Indy was very, very underdeveloped. We were scrapping for, direct flights and trying to solve daylight savings time. And we really had no venture capital to speak of, in Indiana. So we were fortunate. We were forced to bootstrap the company. And I look back and think that was just a wonderful part of our culture. And it was a very effective way to start the company. But it was really out of necessity that we raised a small friends and family round. And then later, we were really fortunate to meet Bob Compton, who became our kind of first angel investor and chairman of the business, and was a really important mentor to me in the early years.
Yeah. When did you know? You got ExactTarget started. When did you know that you really had a tiger by the tail? You really had something of substance with ExactTarget.
I think it was probably 2004. Gary, we grew the business very quickly. We didn't know any different. We were hustlers. We were marketing and selling and landing new customers and working hard to build technology to keep up. And I really thought we would never raise venture capital. We just had no luck, in those early days. So it really was angel investors who believed in us and a very small amount of capital to get us started. But when we started receiving inbound calls from venture firms, West Coast, East Coast, we started showing up in analyst reports. Gartner and Forrester started writing about this emerging category of digital marketing. ExactTarget is one of the emerging leaders. And then we raised our Series A round in July of 2004. Life-changing, really a life-changing event from a firm in New York, Insight Venture Partners. And that Insight believed in us. They were willing to kind of unlock their expertise and their network to help us. That was probably the first turning point where I felt like we were onto something big. And I also felt the pressure. I was really scared, Gary. I signed our term sheet on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. And I thought, I'm a little Midwestern boy with a company here in Indiana.
Yeah.
I'm signing on with one of the biggest, most demanding firms in New York City. I hope I can keep up. I wasn't sure if they would want me to continue to run the company. If I could kind of operate up to their standard. And thankfully, they were incredible partners, and they helped me grow as much as anybody.
Yeah. Wow. The Salesforce deal. Can you share with us? Obviously, your profile was beginning to really skyrocket, but how that Salesforce deal came together?
Interesting, Gary. It was 10 years in the making.
Wow, 10 years.
I think it was like any marriage. It's always good if you date and build a relationship, kind of for a long time. So I say it was 10 years in the making, in that really early in our development, we became a customer of Salesforce, and we just learned from them. We went to school on them. What they were building for the Sales Cloud, we wanted to build for the Marketing Cloud. And we were just tearing pages out of their playbook. We kind of looked at Salesforce as a big brother of sorts. And, we integrated our products together. We built relationships, with the executive team, with sales and marketing teams, feet on the street. We did a lot of kind of co-marketing and co-selling over the years. public. We went public in March of 2012. And, we were thrilled, to be an independent company. We had 5 quarters as a public company. We were rocking and rolling. We were, meeting and exceeding Wall Street expectations. And, at that point, we were about 2,000 employees with offices all over the world. And that's really when Salesforce came knocking. And, they had done 2 small acquisitions in the marketing tech space and really were hearing from their customers that they wanted more. They wanted Salesforce to have as much marketing technology as they had in the areas of sales and service. And they needed richer database capabilities. They needed multi-channel digital communications that ExactTarget really could be more than a partner, and we could just fit into Salesforce so beautifully. So it really was the Salesforce team and Mark Benioff that reached out. And, kind of one thing led to another after a series of, several months of negotiation and lots of work with legal teams and investment bankers. It all came together, and we felt that was the right decision at the right time.
What do you remember, just your personal feelings, once you actually closed on the deal, reportedly $2.5 billion, a big number, a record for Indiana? What were your emotions like when you actually put pen to paper and you signed it, and, all the hard work and the effort and the ups and the downs, and what were your feelings?
Great question. Very emotional. As you can imagine, very bittersweet. When we started into this process of evaluating the Salesforce opportunity and offer, and other, very large global software companies also came to the table, and expressed a tremendous amount of interest. And I kind of thought, going through the process, Gary, I wanted 2 things to be true. One was I wanted confidence that ExactTarget would end up being a part of a remarkable, innovative software company who, no guarantees, but who had a high likelihood to continue investing in Indy. That was really important to me, because Indy just couldn't have been any more supportive of me and our company, from, every mayor, every governor, business leaders. I felt like the community, and you included, Gary, were just cheering us on, every step of the way. And I felt a responsibility, and it really became a big motivator to me. Was I wanted to create as many jobs as possible. I wanted to leave a mark on the city. I wanted to help our city prove that you could build category leading software companies here as effectively as anywhere in the world. So that next chapter, kind of that legacy, that post-acquisition component was really important to me. And then secondly was our share price. I was hopeful that through the process, the share price would get to a level, the offer would get to a level where it just kind of felt like a no-brainer. Like, it was such a wonderful outcome for our shareholders and for our employees that you just had to say yes. And thankfully, those 2 happened. Salesforce emerged as the winner. The price was significantly higher than where we had been trading, and it was really, really good. But to get to the actual signing of the document, Gary, I was in the Bay Area at our law firm's offices, and you'll get a kick out of this. We took 2 photographs of me signing. One, I had like an expression of joy and jubilation. And then one, I had an expression of like terror and fear and, practically crying. And we thought, we'll put those 2 pictures aside and see which one plays out. And thankfully, I would have to say, with the benefit of hindsight here, the joyful picture, is the true winner.
Oh, that's a great story. Great story. Hey, Scott, each week on our podcast, we do what we call the 2-minute drill. We ask some quick questions. So if you're game, we'll do that right now.
Let's give it a shot.
All right, Scott, you're a hard worker, a driver. What's your favorite way to relax?
Playing sports. Tennis, paddle tennis, and golf are kind of my 3 favorite sports.
Okay, now you were a golfer and a tennis player, I think, in high school. Golf or tennis? What do you prefer?
It's interesting. I enjoy both. So I kind of switch back and forth from one to another based on the season. So I probably love the one I'm playing at that moment. But I really, I'd stack them up pretty equally.
Got it. Biggest pet peeve?
Biggest pet peeve, I would say, probably negativity, or people who don't ask for help to help them kind of reach their full potential.
First job you got paid for?
I worked in a pizza shop, Little Caesars, and then my second job, I actually worked in a tennis shop. So that started to kind of ignite my love for tennis. And I would say prior to that, I did get paid for shoveling a lot of driveways and mowing a lot of lawns.
Good. Typical jobs. Yeah. Beer or wine?
Beer.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction.
Two more. Most important mentor outside of family, most important mentor.
I would say Bob Compton. Bob really was the game changer for us in the early days of ExactTarget. And he believed in us, and I learned a great deal from him. And in the early years, I thought if I had any level of success, I wanted to be Bob. I wanted my next chapter to be helping and supporting entrepreneurs.
Yeah, certainly are doing that. And final question. If you had an ultimate dinner, 3 guests at St. Elmo, who would those 3 people be?
Sticking with the tennis theme, I probably would go with Serena Williams, Roger Federer, and then maybe I'd toss in President Obama.
Okay. I would love to be a fly on the wall.
That'd be a fun dinner, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be great. You did great on the 2-minute drill, Scott. We're going to do much more ahead with Scott Dorsey, including his tips for aspiring entrepreneurs, how he is grooming that next wave of Indiana entrepreneurs and innovators, and Scott Dorsey, the early years. That and more when the Business and Beyond podcast returns.
First Person Advisors is now a subsidiary of National Financial Partners, the 5th largest insurance broker and consultant in the world. Develop your total reward strategies all in one place with the combination of First Person's local expertise and NFP's global resources and integrated solutions. Learn more at firstpersonadvisors.com.
Welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast, presented by PNC. My guest this week is technology entrepreneur and innovator, Scott Dorsey. And Scott, you were not, growing up, you were not an Army brat, but you moved around a lot, right? Your dad was an exec at IBM, born in Cleveland, moved to Toledo, Charlottesville, Virginia, Ramsey, New Jersey. You were all over.
We really did, Gary. This was back in the day when IBM stood for I've been moved. IBM families, if you're kind of moving up the career ladder, you moved. And we were an IBM family through and through. My dad worked for IBM for over 15 years, and we were on that kind of every 2-year move cycle. And I actually loved it, Gary. And I look back, with a lot of gratitude for kind of growing up that way. I was very happy actually to kind of anchor into Naperville and be in one place for the back half of junior high and high school. But in my really formative years, we'd move every 2 years. And I think it really taught me at an early age to, embrace change and be willing to meet new people and build new relationships. And, so there's some good life skills that were developed. And we lived in some really neat places along the way. Being in Charlottesville, we were very close to the University of Virginia and went, to a lot of Virginia basketball games, and New Jersey was neat because we were close to New York. And so they were all really good experiences. I was fortunate to have a wonderful childhood.
Yeah. And sports, very important to you growing up. You're a competitive guy. Do you still draw that? Do you think that competitiveness from your early days in sports?
Very much so. Very much so. I still love to compete. I look at, in many ways, there's a strong parallel between business and sport. Building teams, building strategy, trying your best, competing with others. So I love it. I love it, Gary. And I still really enjoy competing on the tennis court or the golf course or playing paddle tennis in the winter. I get a lot of satisfaction, a lot of joy from building, rapport and camaraderie with others, but, having a fair and friendly competition as well.
So you grew up kind of your later years, junior high, high school in Naperville. How did you land at IU?
A good question. I kind of going back to the love of sports, I really, growing up in Big Ten country, I really loved the Big Ten Conference. And I wanted to go to an amazing business school, really wanted to go to a school in the Big Ten, that had strong academic and athletic programs. And I applied and kind of narrowed it down to Illinois, Iowa, and Indiana. And my parents were rooting for that in-state tuition, at Illinois.
Right.
We made the trip to Bloomington on just one of those absolute gorgeous days in Bloomington, kind of a postcard Chamber of Commerce day. And I just fell in love with the university. The campus sparkled. Everyone I met that day during the tour was just, so wonderful and nice and kind. And then, of course, IU has an amazing business school. So it took a little negotiating with my parents, but they agreed that IU would be the choice, thankfully.
So as you mentioned, you got your MBA at Northwestern. And then after college, you got married at 24. But then just like when you were young, you made a bunch of moves, right? Michigan, Colorado, Arizona, California. You were all over the place. What were those early married years like?
Yeah, I really was, Gary. I look back on my career as a series of, not always taking the obvious or the safe choice. And I think it started right out of school. So I graduated with a business degree, marketing degree from IU. And the two offers I was most excited about, one was actually with IBM in Chicago, kind of following in my dad's footsteps, would have probably pulled me into the world of technology sooner. And the other, Gary, was with a company called Steelcase in Grand Rapids, Michigan, focused on office furniture and interior architecture and design. And I love the Steelcase team. I became really interested in culture and workplace productivity. And then as a young guy, they literally gave me a list of 20 cities and said, after 9 months of training in Grand Rapids, you can go to any city you want in America. And I got to choose from a list of 20, and I selected Denver. So I thought that would be pretty neat. I had an aunt and uncle in Denver. I liked the idea of going to a smaller office. I was kind of excited to get out west. So that started my journey, Gary. So we had 9 months of training in Grand Rapids. They shot me out to Denver for kind of my first field assignment. And then 1 year in, I got tapped on the shoulder and got a promotion, and they moved me over to Arizona. So I got to live in Scottsdale, so as a golfer, that was pretty wonderful. And then this was kind of funny. We were heading over to LA occasionally to visit some family, and we always thought LA was a nice place to visit, not sure we'd want to live there. And then I got tapped on the shoulder and had another kind of promotion opportunity in Southern California. And thankfully, my wife, Erin, has been so supportive, through every step of my life. Somehow I convinced her that moving to a bigger market like LA would get us back to Indiana sooner. And I'm not sure she believed it, but she went along with it. So then we moved out to Southern California, and we were out there for 4 years before heading back to Chicago to go to graduate school. But those were some wonderful places to live. And we cherished every moment because we knew we were Midwesterners at heart. And when we, started having children and raising a family, we'd be kind of heading back to Indy and Chicago.
Yeah. One question, because you mentioned you really wanted the ExactTarget, the sale, to ultimately have some legacy, some impact. And one of the things that always strikes me today is when I'm driving downtown and I look at the state's tallest building, to see Salesforce, to see a technology company, on the top of the state's tallest building. I've heard it mentioned several times. People are amazed that something other than a bank or an insurance company would be on the top of the state's tallest building, but it's a tech company, and it's the legacy of really ExactTarget.
It's so neat, Gary. I feel like ExactTarget in so many ways, it's been an incredible blessing in my life, and it's kind of the gift that keeps giving. Here this many years later, and having the tallest building in the state be the Salesforce Tower is just wonderful reinforcement of the special company we built and the community we live in, and I think the growth of the tech sector. This is kind of a funny story, Gary. So Salesforce took a real look at buying us all the way back in 2005, 2006.
Wow.
When we were just a little baby of a company. And, thank heavens it didn't happen. But Mark Benioff came out to Indiana to get to know us and take a closer look at the company. And it was the first time he'd ever been to the state of Indiana.
Oh, wow.
We were at the Circle Tower building, which, we thought was big time, 50, 60,000 square feet. We had almost every floor in the building. We were right in Monument Circle. This was kind of as good as it gets. And I'm not kidding. As I was giving him a tour of our office, he looked out the window and looked at the Chase Tower and said, "That's where you should be. You should be at the tower. You need a bigger building to fuel your growth. You're going to outgrow this building very, very quickly." And boy, was that foreshadowing for what was going to come many years later.
That is a great story. Really good story. You mentioned your mentor, Bob Compton, and talk about what he meant to you in your career, and also maybe more broadly about your view on the importance of mentors.
Yeah, Bob was incredible, Gary. Back in that time frame of 2001, we're scrappy entrepreneurs. We raised a little bit of capital from friends and family, but we were getting a lot of meetings, but no yeses from venture firms and angel investors. Not one. I mean, really not one. And Bob was the first investor to say yes. He just saw something in us that others didn't, and took a chance on us. And it would not be an overstatement to say that just changed everything, Gary. Having his stamp of approval on us in the business just made everything else easier, including raising capital. We had so many other investors kind of pouring in saying, well, if Bob believes in you, count me in.
Yeah.
And that really, really changed the trajectory of the business. And, I've never forgotten that. And I stay in touch with Bob and thank him every chance I get. And to whatever extent I can play that same role today for entrepreneurs, it's an absolute joy to do so. I love it. And it's why I find my job at High Alpha, it doesn't even feel like a job, but it's very rewarding.
Yeah, you're certainly doing that with High Alpha. And one of the things I think, Scott, and I really do mean this, that is so significant about you and what you've done here is the fact that you got a deserved payday from the Salesforce deal, but you didn't leave town. You didn't go somewhere to plop on a beach and relax. You're investing and reinvesting big time into the community, into the broader tech ecosystem, in particular with High Alpha, this venture studio idea. Talk about that. And I mean, it is already in a short period of time produced multiple startups and launched multiple companies. So it's already having a big impact. Talk about the concept, the High Alpha concept, what it's all about, and the impact it's having.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. It's remarkable. We just crossed our 6-year anniversary. It's so hard for me to believe we've been building away at High Alpha for 6 years, but we're absolutely having a blast. And the concept in the very beginning was how do we leverage all these learnings and the wonderful network we built over the years, really to help the next generation of entrepreneurs build companies better, faster, hopefully make fewer mistakes along the way. And we had already been helping entrepreneurs start SaaS and cloud companies almost as a hobby, kind of nights and weekends. Tinderbox got started, and Lessonly, and really some special entrepreneurs and really successful early stage companies. So we got together and thought, what if we built a company to start companies? What if we went all in on building a team and a platform to support entrepreneurs in every way imaginable and just increase their probability of success and increase their velocity? And we live in such a hyper-competitive world. We thought the studio could really help, kind of build some competitive advantage for these early startups, because it's so tough. It's hard to find a category that's not just fraught with so much competition. It's difficult to raise capital, hard to make all those right decisions along the way. So that really was the genesis. I had worked with Mike Fitzgerald, fortunately at ExactTarget. He ran corp dev for us and was really my partner in crime with acquisitions and opening offices around the world. And, Mike and I became dear friends. And then he and Christian were very close to one another. And Christian had been our kind of agency of choice over at Studio Science. And then Eric Tobias became a dear friend when we acquired iGo Digital. So, the four of us were friends and colleagues and very complementary to one another. We have different skill sets and different strengths, and we kind of snapped together and said, let's give this a go. As I was starting to kind of socialize the idea with friends and former investors, what became apparent, Gary, was that some of our potential investors wanted to invest in a startup studio, kind of an operating company, but others wanted us to be a venture fund. And the more we thought about it, we really thought of the venture fund as pre-raising capital on behalf of our yet-to-be-named entrepreneurs, or yet-to-be-formed companies. And given that there's a shortage of venture capital in Indiana, we really fell in love with that idea. So that's what led to the combo of one part venture fund, one part startup studio. We coined it a venture studio. We were the first venture studio to focus on B2B SaaS, and really one of the first venture studios of our kind. Fast forward to today, there are hundreds of venture studios. I think we get a note once a week from somebody in some part of the world that wants to start a venture studio. So I think we've been pioneers in creating this new category.
Yeah, interesting. And you've got a beautiful new headquarters at the Bottle Works development downtown. Scott, I know you get asked this all the time, but for those who are listening, maybe young, budding entrepreneurs, what's your kind of Cliff Notes advice to those, folks who are entrepreneurs want to get into the startup game? What do you say to them?
There's so much to share, Gary. I think probably a couple thoughts that come top of mind. One would be, if you're going to start a new company, make sure you have a pretty interesting and challenging problem that you want to solve, and one that you have some unique perspective on. We call that kind of founder idea fit. Go attack a problem where you have some personal experience and you really have a lot of passion and conviction. You hop out of bed in the morning, eager to make the world a better place by solving that problem, because startups are really hard and they take a long, long time. You're kind of buckling up for 5, 10, 15-year journey, and you want it to be in a category that you love and you find very motivating and very interesting. I'd say second piece of advice, and it kind of gets back to the pet peeve we touched on earlier, is I would just encourage founders to don't be afraid to ask for help. Anyone who's had an ounce of success has had countless people helping them every step of the way. And I think in particular in Indiana, we're a give back community. That's our mindset. People really like to help others. And I encourage young founders to reach out and ask for help and think strategically about your network. How do you build it? How do you grow it? And kind of who among your relationships might be able to help you.
What's next for Scott Dorsey? Scott, you're still a young guy. You're very active, doing a lot of things. Do you have a what's next vision?
I think it's more of the same. More of the same, Gary. I look back on ExactTarget, and we went public in 2012. That's the last tech IPO we've had in the state of Indiana.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't see another one coming in the near term. So I'm very motivated to change that. And not that IPO is the only measure of success, but I'm very motivated to help our community build more breakout tech companies that don't sell when they get to 25 or 50 employees, but have that escape velocity. They create hundreds of thousands of jobs. That, I think, is how we anchor our strength and momentum in the tech community. I think across the startup landscape, wonderful, rich, robust. We have so many talented startup entrepreneurs. Making that transition to scale up is different. And also, I aspire for our community to be up in the ranks of an Austin or Salt Lake City. I just finished serving on a public board called Pluralsight for the last 4 years out in Salt Lake, and I loved it because Utah is such a beautiful place and wonderful people. But boy, Gary, they have dozens of 500 employee plus, 1,000 employee plus tech and software companies that are really booming, and they're drawing in funding and they're creating a lot of jobs and they're going public, and we're not quite there yet. So that's a large part of my motivation, is do everything in my power to help High Alpha be successful. We want to be a global leader in venture studios, and then the companies that choose to build their companies with us, we want them to go big and build some big success stories. And I continue to love Indy. We've been delighted to raise our family here, and this is home. And any opportunity I get, even outside of High Alpha, to help the community, I love it. I was so fortunate to be chair of the Indiana Sports Corp for 7 years, and I'm really involved with Techstar Sports and TechPoint, and this is such a wonderful community, and that those that are willing and eager to make a difference, there are plenty of places to kind of buckle up and get to work and be a part of what's happening here.
Well, Scott, as always, it's been a real treat to catch up with you. Your perspective on so many things, very wonderful for our listeners. And thanks for all you do, have done, continue to do for Indianapolis and for Indiana, Scott.
It's my pleasure, Gary. Right back at you. Any opportunity you and I have to work together, I always jump at it. So thank you.
Yeah, look forward to that. Scott Dorsey, certainly not finished, making an impact in Indiana. Thank you as well for joining us on this episode of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. To listen to this and every episode of the podcast, and for Indiana Business News 24/7, all you have to do is check out InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gary Dick. We'll see you next time.